evening and welcome to yet another discussion when it comes to Transform Kenya. This year we're talking about women, gender, and we're talking about gender, we're talking about both men and women. This year on the 8th of March, women here in Kenya joined the rest of the world in celebrating the International Women's Day with the theme Innovation and Technology. How can women be included in this space of digital and technology? That is the same theme that we're running with here on Transform Kenya. Closing gender gaps in technology and innovation, challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in Kenya. Definitely matters women and girls in this discussion, but of course I'm not alone when it comes to this discussion about closing gender gaps in technology and innovation. I have an able panel, gentlemen and ladies. Prof. Njuguna, thank you for joining us here on Transform Kenya today. Professor Amos Njuguna is the Dean of Graduate Studies, Research and Extension at the United States International University, that is USIU. He will be here, is actually here to talk to us about, research and extension when it comes to matters technology, how women and girls can be involved when it comes to closing that gender gap in terms of technology and information. But then we also have Maureen Otieno on my extreme left. She is a gender justice and women's rights strategist at Oxfam, Kenya. Thank you for joining us today here on Transform Kenya. Seated next to Maureen is Insane Bagaja. I got your name right, yeah? Insane Bagaja, Gender and Protection Officer, Strategies for Northern Development. And of course, Maureen and Bagaja will be talking to us about women and girls, the gender gap that is there when it comes to innovation and technology and how we can close that gender gap. And last but not least, on my immediate left is Hannah Wangombe. Thank you for joining us today tonight here on Transform Kenya. She's the CEO for the Association for Women in Energy and Extractives in Kenya. Thank you. Brilliant minds, diverse panel. We're talking about energy and extractives in Kenya. We're talking about gender and protection. We're also talking about matters education and of course gender and justice and women's rights. That's what I'm saying. It's a diverse panel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on a KTN News Transform Kenya, this year's edition on closing gender gaps in technology and innovation, challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in Kenya. Let me begin this conversation with Ms. Otieno. Let's talk about the digital gender gap that we are having as a country on widening economic and social inequalities. The question is, how has the adoption of technology helped in bridging the gender gap?
Thank you very much for having me and thanks for that question. So when we look at technology and innovation, of course, the key question we ask ourselves is, do we have a favorable environment for women and girls to actually access and gainfully be benefit from the opportunities that innovation and technology has? So I want to recognize that in Kenya, of course, there have been great strides in terms of having women and men participate in innovation and technology and actually through education. However, when it comes to access to meaningful opportunities in terms of getting the technologies, using the technologies for empowerment initiatives, using the technologies for economic initiatives, there remains a lot that needs to be worked on as a country. And that, of course, cuts across board when we look at industries and sectors such as energy and extractives, and we ask ourselves, we have great minds, where are the women in these spaces? So when we talk about digital gender divide, of course the question also remains that it is also pegged on other important factors such as culture, such as tradition, such as education, and those are the agents of socialization. So as a country, we go back to such foundational elements. And when you talk about gender and the digital divide, I would say that there is still room for so much more as a country as we look at the entire ecosystem around how women and men are looked at, both in corporate, at home, and also in various sectors. Thank you.
Actually, you've touched on something I need to ask Professor Njuguna about cultural practices. And Prof, the cultural differences, women's role in the society, can it be a barrier for women to succeed in science?
Thank you for having me here. The cultural barriers, yes, are prevalent. And to put it in perspective, you would have first looking at the gender gap is, of course, is a bit of closing. If you look at the recent report by the World Economic Forum at 68.1%. But then, of course, that's not very good news, because if we continue at that rate, according to that report, we would have to do 136 years to have that kind of equality. And now, what brings this kind of disparity? The cultural factors come to play. There are courses that we say, oh, these ones are gendered towards men, or this is for women. Statistics don't lie, and they tell us that even here in Kenya, the admission, students who get into STEM disciplines, technology included, really drop out. At the enrollment, a ratio of 3 to 7. By the time they are completing, it's a ratio of 1 to 10 in favor of men. So the cultural factors really come to play, that you can't do this. This is a man's job. You go to the ICT department and calculate the percentage of women, and you ask why. It is because of mostly the cultural factors. They were not cultured or brought up being told that you can actually do a STEM discipline. You will have to do humanities and arts. So that on its own, the mindset of the girl child then is that maybe this thing is not for me, it's for boys. And that carries on until they are of age.
Isn't this not, because Prof, from the way you're explaining it, it looks like more, it's now turning to be a concern for institutions of higher learning, because, I mean, these barriers may directly, if I'm not wrong, or indirectly impede a successful scientific career. Because it means then, in some societies, because of cultural barriers, women may be considered not suitable or somehow unequipped for leadership positions.
Exactly. As you start looking at from the leadership of higher education institutions, for example, just check what is the percentage of scientists, and out of this percentage of scientists, how many are men and how many are women? How many female VCs do we have in this country, for example, vice chancellors of universities and women who are holding senior leadership positions? So it begins from an early stage and it develops all along.
Right.
When we study at the university, everyone needs a role model. You want to go to a class and say, I want to be like Professor so-and-so. Professor so-and-so is teaching me physics, and I want to be that. But that professor is not a woman, for example. So by the time you take your course, less than 20 or 30% of the faculty who are teaching in STEM disciplines is much less. You haven't interacted with them.
Right.
And research shows that there are certain issues and problems in learning that are on girls that are better understood when you have peer-to-peer, a senior who is a mentor, who is a female. Research shows clearly that you tend to have that.
All right. All right. So, Ms. Ongombe, I mean, you are the CEO for the Association for Women in Energy and Extractives in Kenya. Before I pick your mind, in order to ask you, when you talk about women in energy and extractives, what do we mean?
Okay, so thank you, Brenda, for having me and for representing AWAKE, we call it in short. And so we work with women who are in the oil, gas, mining and energy value chains. And we largely work with women who are professionals that will be either employed by a large mining company, who could be in PR, in some jobs that are really management. Then we have women who supply the value chains along those extractives who are business women or small and medium enterprises. Then we have what we call the grassroots and artisans. These are women who are in mine sites, mining gemstones, gold, quarrying and sand harvesting, and many other industrial minerals. And so when we talk about women in that space, then we talk about those that are along those value chains.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So then, in your view, what are the main challenges facing women in this sector?
In relation to technology and innovation, extractives is largely male-dominated sector, has been for a long time, although that is changing. And I really want to echo what Professor Njuguna is saying, that it starts from academic, from education. We have 9 universities currently that are giving mining and petroleum-related courses. But when you look at the number of women that subscribe to those courses, actually the number is negligible. And as we speak, there's some universities that have had a hard time running those courses because there's no uptake. And so it starts from there. Secondly is that extractives is largely technical, especially if you're involved in large-scale mining. And so if you're not apt to the technologies that have been adopted by many of these large mining companies, then you're disenfranchised in working in such an industry. And I want to come to the women that are artisans. A lot of it is done manual work. And so what happens is that they're not able to go deeper than men who would afford excavators and other machinery. And this is where technology plays a part. And then you look at the conversation we're having around energy transition. And we're telling women, stop using firewood, let's use gas. But when we talk about affordability and accessibility, then women are more disenfranchised when we're talking about technology and innovation issues. And lastly, Brenda, is to say, when you look at the patents or innovations around energy or extractives, there is no data disaggregated to show women playing a part in patenting or creating those innovations.
All right.
Thank you.
And Bagala, I mean, when Wangombe was talking, I could see you agreeing with so many things that she's saying. But then let's spotlight the importance of protecting the rights of women and girls in the digital spaces and addressing online and ICT facilitated gender-based violence.
So I thank you for having me tonight. I work in protection, gender and protection, and mostly in implementing programs. And for me, I just want to build on what Maureen has said on women lacking in terms of these foundational elements, which is one of it that she mentioned was education. And for the community that I work with, one thing that actually misses is education. And when I talk about education, when education misses, then how do we even talk about the ICT element? How do we even talk about the technological element? For example, we at SND, which is the organization I work for, we implement programs such as cash transfers, which is done through gadgets such as phones, because we use money transfer applications such as M-Pesa. So when we use this kind of technology, it's difficult for women who are our priority targets to actually have access to small gadgets such as phones. So foundational elements, small things that actually lack is what we should actually talk about before we even delve deeper into the bigger conversation around ICT or even bigger technologies for women, especially for women in rural areas.
So that means, Pagal, if I got you right, it's more like the world is going digital. We're talking about going digital, but women in the interior parts of the country, marginalized communities, the remote areas of this country are still lagging behind.
Exactly, because the technology is advancing, but the little that people started with, or the rest of the world started with, this group of people do not even have access to. So that's why I said there's lack and access in terms of the foundational elements, which, for example, is small technologies, but also, more importantly, education. Yes.
All right. And Ms. Otieno, do you think bringing women and other marginalized groups into technology results is more creative solutions and has greater potential for innovation that can meet women's needs and promote gender equality?
Yes, of course. I mean, what women are really looking out for is the opportunity. And it's the platform that allows them as marginalized, for the marginalized communities, for women, because at times we miss it. Women are not homogeneous. Women can have multiple layers of discrimination in one woman. You can face it from culture, from tradition. But having them in those spaces is important, because we are talking about a very important conversation around creating opportunities. We are having a very important, as we talk about innovation and technology, the question is about agency. And that is about women's ability to really set goals, act on them, and actually achieve them. So before, as Insene has rightfully put, again, we go back to the foundational element, and it's important to have women in the spaces of innovation and technology. But of course, as a country, we ask ourselves one question. Kenya ranks 118 out of 146 in educational attainment when we talk about gender gap parity and rankings in the country. So that speaks volumes, because then we cannot even take up the conversation of innovation and technology. But it's important because it feeds into our Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And the most important question for us as a country is it equitable? I just referred to Insene. Insene is working in the ASAL counties. Is it equitable for our ASAL counties? Is it equitable for urban programming? So having marginalized, having women in all their facets, I mean, in the spaces of innovation and technology breeds diversity. And that is what is important for Kenya, for us to have diversity and to actually live up to the expectations that we hold in our constitution in terms of equality and freedom from non-discrimination under Article 27 of the Constitution of Kenya.
And you've touched on something really important. Before I come to Professor Njuguna, I mean, for more than a century, people around the world, of course, every year, 8th of March, we're celebrating International Women's Day, different themes year in, year out. But what majority of women globally are asking, is there anything actually to celebrate about, especially in countries where women are yet to be given their rightful place in the society, based on just what you've explained?
Yes, of course, there are great gains. I mean, I will speak to the gains that we have seen in terms of women who are coming up with different innovations that are really shifting society. And I also look at women in informal work, where we see that almost over 80% of women in Kenya are in informal work, and the sector is highly unregularized. So when we look at a sector that has over 80% of women, then of course there are great gains. But again, we ask ourselves, what about the enabling environment? And Oxfam did a study on gender and protection issues in the ISME sector, and one of the greatest findings from that research is that when it comes to the environment, it's not favorable for women. As we talk about access to market, as we talk about the transition from education into paid work, it's not favorable for women. So again, we also want to ask ourselves, as we wish to have the women there, what environment are we really creating? Yes.
Wow, thank you for that in-depth explanation. So Professor Njuguna, I mean, gender-responsive approach to innovation, technology and digital education, can it create awareness, rather increase awareness of women and girls regarding their rights and civic engagement?
When you look at gender, at awareness with regard to technology and innovation and the connection to how they can make gains out of it, there are two things you need to look at. And the first one is what Maureen has said, which is women are not homogeneous. An urban woman is in different environment and circumstances with a woman who lives in the rural areas. A woman who is in agricultural counties is completely different with the women. The environment is completely different with the women that INSE is working with in ASAL counties. So when you start thinking about awareness and how you promote it, you first think through what is the environment in which this woman is in. Why is it important? If you look at the access to internet, for example, women in urban areas will mostly access internet compared to those in rural areas for obvious reasons. They are the ones mostly having smartphones. In the rural area, just like Insa is saying, they are not ordinarily smartphones. When you look at access to internet, only out of all those accessing for women, the ratio is 63%. For men, it's 69%. So education and awareness plays a critical role if packaged to suit the specific disaggregated sector that you want to address.
In fact, Prof, I was about to ask you that, because just try and paint for us a picture, bring us into your world of academics at the Institution of Higher Learning. So you get, for example, you get two women from different backgrounds. One from, the interior parts of the country, marginalized community where she works with so many women from that area where even technology is something new to them. Some of them don't even know. Then now you get a woman from an urban sort of setup, center where technology is just, a click of a button. So when these two women come to your Institution of Higher Learning, then how do you like embrace them in a way that now we're talking about technology and innovation, and they want to do that course that, Wangombe is talking about, some courses that women feel like, oh, this is a man's dominated field.
Yes. Let me again first put into perspective, because even when you talk of a woman in the urban setup, again, there are subcategories. A woman who lives in Karen is exposed to a different set of variables than a woman who lives in Kibera or Mathare or that kind of thing. Again, there's still a distinction.
Yeah.
And what we have found and what we have learned through our programming is that you've got to first bring people to the same level. For example, we do have a program that sponsors individuals, young people from disadvantaged communities and vulnerable communities, where we are looking, it's sponsored by the MasterCard Foundation. We are looking at sponsoring up to 1,000 students, of whom 70% must be girls. So what do? We get these girls. They are from disadvantaged communities. They are refugees. They are living with disability. So what do? Even before the university opens, we give them what we call a pre-university orientation. So you've brought life skilling to give them the self-esteem that's required, digital skills to prepare them to start using computers and all that, financial literacy so that when they receive a small stipend, they can be able to manage it in a good way. So you literally first make them comfortable and feel that they are human beings, human beings worth to be in a university. By the time the university opens, you see them, you won't even notice. And then we walk with them all the way through to the 4 years. So we are very conscious as a university to identify these individuals, work with them, provide psychosocial support to them, and provide them with a safe environment. The key word here, Breda, is safe environment for the women. Thank you.
All right. And so, Wangombe, how can then data disclose help? How can data disclosure help improve gender inclusion now that you're talking about innovation and technology? Because we are always talking about data.
Yeah. So, before I answer the question, I'll answer it just by bridging a bit of what Prof is raising. And when I look at education, he's talking from a higher learning point of view. We have CBC that we're currently implementing as a country. So the question is, how do we bring everybody at par as a country? We're not going to be able to bring everybody the last mile with electricity until after a period of time. And so the question still begs, the issue of equality, education will still need to play a role. And how we do that then is a matter of policy. And so then data plays a role because, for instance, and I'll bring it back to the sector and industry I work in, we're telling women to transition to using solar. But how many women can afford to buy solar panels? She's going to tell you that for as long as you cannot offer me an affordable, accessible alternative to my firewood, then your solar panels, keep them to yourself. Yeah. And so when we're talking about data is about disaggregating who can access what we are saying as innovation, as technology. But right now, Brenda, as we talk, how many women don't have access for us to put policy interventions to ensure that they do? The data is there, it's scanned, and quite largely collected by very many individuals and not in a central point of view, central place where then you can access it and say that I will make a decision based on the data available. Yeah.
Right. But then how helpful is this data?
This data is helpful because for us right now, I was earlier saying that we have very few women in universities doing mining and petroleum related courses. So out of that, we have created a mentorship program. And this mentorship program is linking women to industry to ensure that we are saying to industry, hey, there are women doing these courses and they're right for industry. Could you take them up on internships and jobs? So for us, it is about decision making and around ensuring that industry is intervening for that cause.
Right.
Yeah.
But Gala, let me just ask you this question. You know, when I was asking about data, I was just having you in mind. You know, working with women in the most marginalized communities in the ASAL areas. How do you convince them? These women who see other women in TV, you know, in television, read their stories on newspaper, and they want to be like them, you know, in this innovative sector. How do you encourage them and tell them, you know what, you can be that? As much as you're talking about digital technology, and yet, earlier on you told us, some of them even just operating a mobile phone is an issue.
Thank you for the question. So, it's very difficult if I'm very honest with you. But you know, because all of these things they are rooted in culture. It's part of socialization. Young girls grow up knowing that, you know, they know their place. They go with their mothers. They see what their mother does, and that's what they perceive as what they should be doing, and that's their role for the entire many years of their lives that they're going to live. So convincing these people to actually tell them that, you know, you can be so and so on TV, you can be Brenda, you know, from Marsabit, or you can be insane even, because I'm from also Marsabit County. But using myself as an example, when I talk to these communities, when I talk to these women, we have several community dialogues that we normally hold, and we normally invite men and women to come to these community dialogues, because with these kind of conversation, because this is an issue of changing mindset. It's something that is deeply rooted. So you have to change the behavior. You have to kind of do constant communication, constant dialogues to actually tell these people that, you know, you can be a pastoralist but still have a better future for your child. You can take your children to school. I mean, things are better now for pastoralist communities, because most pastoralist communities are now slowly but surely taking their children to school. But we are not there yet. We haven't gotten to a point where we have enough pastoralist children go to school, because even when they go to school, it's so easy for them to drop out, because there is no that tangible reason for them to stay in school. And also, given that their livelihood is mostly dependent on the cattle that they have, which is their pride. Depending on the season, if the season is not too good, then all hands are supposed to be on deck, especially during these times of drought. So every child is out of school, especially girls, because the first thought that comes to every pastoralist parent's head is get the girl out of school, because she needs to help her mom do the chores, or she needs to help in, you know, walking 8-9 kilometers away from home to go fetch water for the household. So the conversation around convincing such group of people to change their lifestyle to something that is, you know, modern and maybe even helpful for them in the future is a bit difficult. But with people like myself and a lot more that are educated, that had gone to school, that come from that community, the future is not bleak, I would say. Yeah, we still have hope. We still will continue speaking about, why we should take our children to school, why they should stay in school, and why in particular we need to have girls in school, and why they should venture into STEM. Because we have to take the first baby step first, take them to school, and then think about now how you can mentor them to start thinking about how they can venture into STEM. So the future is not bleak. We still have hope, but a lot of sensitization, a lot of thinking around change in terms of, not even change, but kind of diversification in terms of livelihood, because the practice in Marsabit County, or the practice of pastoralist communities, is you have to depend on the livestock, and you have to put your all in that. So introducing different kind of livelihood projects or alternative means of livelihood, I think would do tremendous in terms of shifting the gears from depending on.
And I believe what I'm hearing all of you talk about is, the question is, what can men do to help achieve equality? And it's good we have we have Prof here. What can men do to help achieve equality when it comes to innovation and technology? Time for a short commercial break on Transform Kenya, but don't go, because the conversation continues when we come back.